Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and today we're talking about the 5 hardest events in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. Now, let's be clear, we're talking like Journey Guide, Galactic Legend events, which ones are the hardest. This is my opinion. I do have 2 honorable mentions in the list because I do think they deserve shouts. So let me know your thoughts down below, like, subscribe. This week was going to look a lot different in terms of content. I was going to try and do a much larger focus on territory battles. Unfortunately, Capital Games is poverty with their coding, so we're going to catch up on some video ideas I've had that just haven't got a chance to make. So let's get in here. Let's thank the channel members for their continued support. If you guys are ever interested, that link is down below along with a link to the Discord server. Make sure you guys go check that out. The members not only get a special section of the Discord where they get to even just talk with each other, but they get a lot more direct access to me, not just through the DMs, but I've got a section in there where they can ask advice and not just a roster review, but like, hey, Phil, what mod should, which character should get this mod? So trying to sell that a little bit. Let me know what you guys think. Again, let's get to our introduction and talk through this list. All right, so as the music fades, we've got our first one, which is C-3PO. Now, back in my day, this was a lot more, back in my day, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes Boomer, this was a lot more challenging. Before Nisa, this was one of the most, I'd argue this was the most difficult event pre-Nisa. With Nisa, it has just completely changed. And I'd even argue, we got Nisa and it got easier, but I'd even go as far as to say that getting Leia has made the event easier. One of the biggest reasons this event was so challenging was that everybody tried to do it with under-geared Ewoks. So, back, and I'd even say a lot of the early legendary events in Galaxy of Heroes, what made them difficult wasn't so much that it was actually hard, but it was a mod check and it was a gear check. That they would preload the enemies with so much turn meter, so that way if you had low gear characters, they would die before you'd get a turn, so that way you actually had to gear your characters to get through these things. So this event was kind of designed that way. If you didn't want to gear your Ewoks beyond gear 9, then you were really in an uphill battle. I'm pretty sure the last time I had checked, I had before I put gear on them, and there's a Discord thing or a bot that will tell you if you cheated in an event or not. And I think my Ewok one was over 50% that I probably cheated. I did not. I filmed myself multiple times doing it without, without Nisa and with Nisa. But it is just a very challenging event, right? I think once you get Nisa, and obviously if you're going for Leia and you throw extra gear on these characters, it gets it to be a joke. So it's still a challenging event to try and do it with lower gear. I think as time goes on, that will move to an honorable mention. But for the sake of this video, and I think because it's still very relevant, that is definitely on the list. Next, we've got Admiral Raddus. The Profundity bonus tier can go die. It can go die a painful death, just like Manchester City's Champions League run this year. Yep, I said it. No, honestly, this, before you get this ship to 7-star, that bonus tier is just a nightmare. It is so incredibly difficult because you don't get to use the Millennium Falcon. The Profundity fleet doesn't need to be 7-star, but it does need, the Millennium Falcon to get it to tick, right? When you look at any fleet with Profundity in your fleet arena, they always have the Millennium Falcon because, they're just, spaghetti and meatballs, right? They are Holland and ghosting in big games, right? They go hand in hand. But it is just, it's so difficult. It's an honorable mention for me because I think the one caveat here is that there's times where it goes really smoothly and there's times where it just goes really poorly. So honorable mention, it is difficult, but there's some other ones on here. Other honorable mention as we get, another honorable mention is the Bo-Katan Mandalore event. I've heard the horrors. I've not experienced it firsthand, so I can't say one way or the other that it's the most challenging because I've not done it. I've seen that it's difficult. The argument I'll make here is that I think it's still early in the game where there's not a lot of brilliant guides for it yet. You think of a lot of these other events, there's all of these guides from all these different content creators, and players have had the opportunity to master it. Whereas this one, we've not gotten there yet, so there's still probably some things to work out. But I've heard the horrors. I believe it's an honorable mention. I think as time goes on, this will take the place of C-3PO in my opinion, where I think this is going to be it's probably one of the more challenging events. Honorable mention, absolutely. All right, next is the Malik light side event. And yeah, like, you get exactly what I'm trying to say here. When you compare Malik to General Skywalker events, the argument I make is that General Skywalker's event eventually just gets what I call gear solved. If you equip enough gear and put decent enough mods on your characters, you're going to win regardless. Like, I've won with these droids and not really following the strategy at all. Like, I can just kind of brute force my way through it with the relics that I have. When you compare that to the Malik event, where like the light side path for Malik is a lot more challenging, because it's not so much the gear that's the problem. It's if Malik gets all those bonuses, if you're not paying attention, he will just slowly destroy your team and you eventually can't kill him. So I think the Malik event is a much tougher event than General Skywalker in that regard, where I think General Skywalker's just eventually gets gear solved. Obviously, if you do it with a lot less gear, it's very challenging, but so is Malik's. So the biggest difference here is that, like, even at my level, and I'd say even if I had all these characters at relics, I'd still have to follow the strategy guide that I created to beat this event. Whereas for General Skywalker, it's not really the case. It just gets solved by gear. That's why Malik is on the list. And I think that's pretty reasonable. I'd say most people would probably agree with that. Especially, I'll say this, most people who've played the General Skywalker event post-nerf would agree with that. If you played it pre-nerf General Skywalker event was way harder. I don't want to hear it. That's even PTSD. All right, next is the Grand Inquisitor event, and Capital Games absolutely hates us. Now, there's two parts here, because like not only is the Grand Inquisitor event hard, but their assault battle before you get Reva is just like Geneva Conventions. Call like, you know, everybody, investigate it for crimes against humanity. Like, it is just insane. What I hate about the Grand Inquisitor event, why it's up here, is there's just so much RNG involved in the events. Every single tier, there's RNG involved. I don't think they really teach you how to use Inquisitors, if I'm perfectly honest. Like, I think it's a horrible event. It takes forever. The Fulcrum tier, don't get me started. Like, it just, I feel like they had the right intention of, hey, let's make events hard. And personally, I enjoy challenges, but as you guys will see with this next one, I enjoy challenges when they require skill, not necessarily when they require some luck on your side, or like, you need this perfect little lineup, you know, right? Like, it just, yeah. So then we get into our first Galactic Legend, right? Number 2 on this list is Rey. And I actually enjoyed Tier 6. Now, Tier 6 of the Rey event is the hardest event, probably from a skill perspective. I could put other Galactic Legend tiers in between these two, and I chose not to because, like, then it gets boring. Here's what I'll say, right? If you, like, all Galactic Legend tiers in some degree are difficult because losing has a cost to it. If you lose in the Grand Inquisitor event, the Malik event, any of these other ones, there's no impact to your account. You just get to try again right away. But you lose at a Galactic Legend tier, and you're losing GL tickets, and you've got to start over from scratch, and it's a pit in your stomach. You hate it. So it's kind of like taking a penalty kick in a penalty shootout versus when your team is up 6-0. Like, there's no pressure when you're playing that Grand Inquisitor event, because you can just try again. Doesn't matter, right? Hey, Phil, I just need you to score a penalty kick before the end of practice. Like, okay, easy enough. I can take 100 of them. Hey, Phil, I need you to score this penalty kick so we win the World Cup. All right, well, all of a sudden, putting a little bit more pressure on. And that's kind of how I would say GL events get a lot more difficult, is that there's a pressure element that's missing from the other ones. But I actually enjoyed Rey Tier 6. I do think it's the most challenging tier for, like, her ultimate. And that's because this event, in my opinion, of all of them, I think her Tier 6 is, I'd argue, like 10% modding, 90% skill. And that you can reduce the amount of skill it takes if you get a bit more mods in there. But it's just a skill check, in my opinion. It really just comes down to a skill check. That, do you understand how to use this character, how to use the Resistance faction, and how the First Order faction works, so that way you can beat them. that's where I think the skill comes in. It's not just skill of using these characters, but skill of understanding the first order characters that you're going up against, so you don't make them have more health and protection by removing turn meter, so you understand the kill orders and things. I think that this event is definitely just a skill issue more than anything else. There's not a lot of RNG involved in this one. There's no RNG in terms of, oh, Kylo stunned your GL Ray, now you're screwed. Like, it doesn't matter who he stuns off the bat. Just play the event. It's just a skill issue. And I'm sorry if you think that's harsh and I'm calling you trash. Like, I'm not trying to do that. It's a skill issue. Like, it really is. But we get to the hardest one. And that is Leia, the terror tier that is Leia tier 2. This was designed in a lab to just make us hate life. Leia tier 2 is absolutely the most challenging Galactic Legend event in the game. It requires, like, I still have my mods saved for this, right? I still have my mod sets saved for this event. Of course I can't equip them here. Hold on. Like, if I go into, like, my mods, I was trying to equip them just to show you guys, like, how absurd it is. But, like, you have to completely change your mods for tier 2, right? Like, you got your Rolo mods, I've got my Captain Han, like, they need very specific mods. And even then, with all the specific mods, there's a strategy, but there's still an element of RNG. And that's why it's the hardest, in my opinion. There comes a point in that battle. I've played it enough times. I have seen enough battles through other players. I've walked channel members through it. I've walked friends through it. I've done it myself I should say this. I did not fail it in my 3 attempts for Leia, but I have failed it trying to recreate it and do it again. I have failed. I'm not going to lie. And it's because there's elements of RNG that you can play that battle perfectly and still lose. Simply because if certain things go the wrong way, you're just done for. And I think that element of RNG has always been a big issue for me. That why I enjoyed the Leia, like, why I enjoy Rey tier 6 is because there's skill involved, right? It's actually, like, fun to play. Whereas, like, the tier 2, there's just RNG. Kind of like GOTB, when Droidica would just snipe somebody out and you're like, what the heck? You know, like, of course you sniped out my Jolie. Like, why couldn't you have sniped out somebody I could revive? It's the same thing here. It always just felt like there's this RNG element that I could play perfectly and I'm still going to lose. And that's why, in my opinion, this is the hardest event. It's not even because I think it takes the most skill, because it does not. I think it just takes the most RNG of any of the rest of the GL battles. Because all the rest of them, there's strategies, there's guides, and then Leia tier 2, there's still guides. But I have watched people follow guides to the letter, do everything right, and still fail simply because Darth Vader gets a critical hit on your Captain Han with 6 dots because he's used his Force Crush every single time because you haven't landed a single ability block. Like, what are you supposed to do? So, that's the end of the video, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below. Again, like, subscribe, comment. I love you all. May the Force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, my friends.